All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fast Break podcast. We're your hosts, Ari Betterly, Ryan Costello, and Sam Elster from the Hoosier Network. Guys, welcome back. Happy belated Thanksgiving.
Yes.
How was your Thanksgivings?
Good. Lots of college basketball to watch, Hoosiers to watch, both men's and women's. It was fun.
A lot of good mac and cheese, a lot of good food.
You
a lot
and
of
your
good
mac and
eating.
cheese.
It's so good.
Obsessed.
I'm obsessed.
I agree. It was a great time for food, rest,
Yeah.
but also some good basketball to
Yeah,
watch. It was a
totally.
fun time with all the tournaments going on. So,
Mhm.
leading into tournaments, let's talk about what we missed this past week with IU women's basketball. Starting with the Bahamas recap. I'm going to throw it to you, Sam, who covered the first game. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. Ryan, I think.
Yeah,
Oh,
I actually
Ryan
covered
did it.
it.
It's
Oh,
okay,
oh.
Ari.
No.
Don't worry.
They got off to they were playing a good Columbia team and they played them close really the entire game, and it wasn't until the very end where Indiana was able to finally go on a run and close it out. But Yarden Garzone, it was her 21st birthday last year when they were in another tournament. She had a big game, and she had a big game this day, same on her birthday again, and it was a double-double. And then also Lily Meister stepped up big, but they kind of showed that they can win one of those close games. So that was good to see for a team that's struggled in some of those closer games.
I think definitely a step in the right direction. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that carried on perfectly to game 2, the semifinal versus number, I think they're ranked 14th Baylor or 16th?
18th, I think.
18th,
Yeah.
somewhere in the top 25. And I mean, they came out hot. They went on to a early 17-2 lead, but overall it was Shea Chesky's game. And, you know, she had 34 points. It seemed like she seriously could not miss a shot. It was almost like every single shot that she was putting up, it was just dropping. But probably, other than Shea having a great game, the other big news of the game was Sydney Parrish going down. She, the way that was, I would just say it was an awkward fall. I think that was the way I first worded it because her knee was kind of twisted a little bit with the other player on Baylor's. But she left the game. That was, I think, in the beginning of the second half. And then ultimately, it was really impressive how the Hoosiers continued to keep up the energy against this Baylor team because they were getting the big Baylor forwards in the paint. They got them in foul trouble early on, which I think really helped them. They overall they fought and they came out on top, which it was really impressive. It was really impressive to see.
I bet for Chesky that was really nice to finally
yeah.
see her shot go down because
Yeah.
she struggled so much from three.
It was honestly I felt so happy for her almost.
Same.
Because I feel like in preseason all we were really thinking about and talking about was how much of a great shooter she was. Hoosier Hysteria, she was lights out for the 3-point contest, and then she was kind of struggling. So seeing her knock down those shots, it was a good feeling.
I agree. I think
Mhm.
it was nice for her to finally get hers for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
And then, even though this was such a great moment for Shea Chesky, it was her game. Went into game 3, the championship game against UNC, number 16 in the country. It was a very hard loss for Indiana. I will say I think it was the most expected loss out of the games they played thus far, in my opinion. But overall, Shea Chesky, I think, was held to maybe 5 points the entire game. Compared to over her 30-plus points the day before. So it was kind of weird to see that consistency lack in the next game. But it wasn't just her. It was every single player. You could see they all just kind of looked tired compared to, UNC's hard-fought defense that just would never stop. And I think their defense is ranked in the top 4 in the nation. So to be expected, you're going to be hustling against this team. They limit their teams to under 48.6 points. So it makes sense why they only had 39 points, but it's also just crazy to me that, they went from having such a big night from the 3-point line and overall just shots going down to, a 39-point game. So
I think it's just crazy because it was it was under 10 points at halftime. So one would think that they would fight and it wouldn't be a 30-point loss. You just don't see a lot of that with Terry Moore and teams. But one player I think that did, even though as a whole Indiana didn't have a great game, I think Jules Lamondola in her first start, she had 11 rebounds. That was a career high. I think that was nice to see that hustle after she got that first game started ever in her career.
Right, just because, Sydney Parrish was out, so she had to step up. And I think that's kind of what Terry Morin was kind of explaining in the press conference that she needed those guards to step up, especially when Sydney's not there, because it's a huge void on the floor. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to see that, she's stepping into the role. They talked a lot about her on the broadcast, too.
Yeah, she's really been stepping up very well, I think. Like, as a player, going into the big shoes of Sydney Parrish, it's got to be hard, but she's been like playing hard. She's been drawing like charges, always like putting a body on the floor for her team. It's cool to see like a sophomore stepping up like that.
Right. So leading from that, we're going to move forward to Maine. That was just this past Sunday. Also, kind of a bounce back game, you could say. But let's talk about that. Sam, why don't you start us off with that one?
Yeah, I think the offense looked amazing. I mean, Maine kind of kept it close until halftime, but I think that Maine playing a zone the entire game really helped IU play the inside-out game, pass it in, draw defenders in, and then kick it back out and shoot from the perimeter. Claymore McNeil started off hot, and I think that just kept them rolling really well.
Yeah, hot. I feel like that's an understatement. She scored 5 points in the first 53 seconds.
Right.
I don't think I've ever seen an opposing coach call a timeout so fast.
That was quick.
It was before
Real
like a
quick.
minute into the game that they called a timeout. So she just led that and was the key player and the leader that she needs to be with.
Yeah.
Her fellow captain being out of the lineup.
Totally agreed.
And, I will say, I think Lily Meister also played a good game. She had 18 points, a game-high 9 rebounds. And then you also have the Yarden Garzons, who's pretty consistent, with 11 points. So overall, I just think a lot of players had a moment to shine.
Yeah.
Definitely Lily and definitely Chloe.
Yeah. I mean, Lily definitely took advantage that the main starting lineup, it was 4 guards, and then they're like, quote unquote center was like basically like a shooting guard. So, they took
5
over.
guards out on the court.
Yeah, they took advantage of the mismatch, which was pretty good coaching by Terry Moore, and of course good observation by the Indiana offense.
India, talking about their offense, they had 25 assists on 30 made shots, which is impressive, especially for a team that's struggled on the other end with turnovers, that they're really playing together. And I feel like after a 30-point loss, you really do have to come together and not focus on the doom and gloom. And I feel like that's kind of what Chloe Moore McNeil was saying in the post-game press conference.
Yeah. And Terry Moore, and I'll leave it with this, said at the press conference that this is a step in the right direction for us. We're going to take one game at a time, and we're looking forward to the challenges ahead, meaning that this team is capable of a lot, but they just need to put into the work. And she said it wasn't going to be a straight road this whole season, that it's going to have its ups and it's going to have its downs. But she said that this is the right direction. So now moving forward, there's 2 games this week, one being tomorrow, a little different than Maine or maybe a UNC, but a Southern Indiana. So let's dive into that.
Yeah.
So Southern Indiana, they're in their 3rd year transitioning from Division II. Now they're in Division III. They play in the Ohio Valley Conference. And last year, in only their 2nd year Division I, they went 25-7 and won both their regular season and their conference tournament, which is, I think, pretty impressive for a team that was playing lower quality basketball teams only 2 to 3 seasons ago, that they've been able to turn it around that fast.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty impressive too. And they have 10 returning players from last year's squad. So, that's got to be a little bit of a scary, stat that stands out for Indiana. And also, I mean, looking at the players to look out for, I mean, they have a guard, Vanessa Shafford, who's leading the team in rebounding and 3-point makes. I feel like that's really rare to see a guard leading a team in rebounding and 3-pointers, kind of showing that she can go all around. But I think, Indiana will have to, use the energy that they had against Maine and bring that back tomorrow night.
I agree. And I also think it's an interesting thing that was written in here that, Coach Rick Stein has coached 26 seasons with this team, and he actually coached against Terry Moore when she was at UIndy. So it's another Indiana matchup that, it's kind of like Butler, where it's more like in-state rivalry, maybe, not really, but yeah, just kind of interesting. But I think that Indiana will definitely exploit the depth and pull away in the second half, my personal maybe prediction.
Yeah.
But overall, I definitely think that Southern Indiana isn't out of this. I think there's an opportunity for them, like you said, to use those players they've had before and use their experienced coach to stay in this game, kind of like Butler did, and surprised Indiana. So
yeah, honestly, it could be like a similar matchup that we saw from like Harvard and Brown, where they're going to really have to defend the perimeter better.
I think Indiana will definitely want to look at their only loss of the season, which is to ranked Louisville, to kind of see how Louisville was able to pull away, because they had a close first quarter, but then after that, it wasn't super close. So definitely study that film and try to replicate their formula for winning that game.
Yeah.
Right. And then moving from southern Indiana, we're going to jump right to this weekend. Penn State, the first Big Ten matchup Indiana's had all season long. It's kind of give us maybe a little taste of what's to come for the rest of the season. I'm sure they're all anticipating this matchup more than maybe any they've had so far. So let's talk about Penn State. Obviously, this is Shay's old school where she just transferred from. They're ranked 59th in the country, so they're not ranked as high as Indiana, but they're 8-1 in the season so far.
Yeah.
So that's important to note. And 8-0 was the best start they've ever had in program history. So they've had wins over a couple teams, Georgia, and then overtime against Drexel. So they're not playing a bad game of basketball. And I remember specifically last year, things changed, but they played a pretty highly defensive and aggressive game against Indiana, and it was anybody's game in my opinion. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see because they're going to Happy Valley. It's, I think, the first true road test. I know I kind of said that about Butler, but I really mean it this time against Penn State. Because this is a team that, is also coming off a loss, so they're going to be hungry for a win. But they're also a team that's kind of similar to Indiana. They average a lot of turnovers, averaging around in the 20s to be exact. They had 22 against St. John's yesterday. So I think that them and Indiana play a very similar game.
I'm talking about an Indiana connection. Allie Campbell transferred from Notre Dame in 2021, so kind of know the feel. Not really, but her stats kind of jump off the page to me. She's kind of doing everything in each different category. 8.9 points, 1.2 blocks, 1.8 steals, 4.9 assists, and 4.3 rebounds. That was a mouthful, but you kind of can see how she's an all-around player that Indiana probably definitely has to watch out for, who's trying to just grab the ball and kind of mess with you the entire game.
Yeah, totally.
Any predictions for the game coming up, or is it too tough to call right now for Penn State?
I don't know. I think it's really going to they're very similar teams, as I said before, but it's also going to have a lot to do with the matchup between Gracie Merkel and Lily Meister. Gracie's now third week in a row collecting Big Ten weekly honors. So, she had 31 points and 11 rebounds against Drexel earlier this season, averaging just shy from a double-double, 20.2 points, 9.1 rebounds. So I think Lily Meister is really going to have to stay out of foul trouble early on, because I think if she gets into foul trouble early, she'll limit her minutes and she won't really get a chance to go up against her.
And something Terry Morin said in the press conference is that she's working on, Lily being able to be on the court longer minutes, that she needs her to stay, not tired. And when she does, that's when the turnovers happen. So in order for them to win and, not have those turnovers and constantly, losing the ball like they've had in a couple of other matchups this season, they're going to really need to focus on her stamina, is what Terry Morin was saying.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say
Ryan, I'm sorry.
No, you are perfectly fine. I think, like you just said, I think having Meister in the game is
Two great minds think alike.
Exactly. Sorry. I think having Meister in the game is really important to their success. And she has had some tendencies in past games to get into foul trouble quickly. So I think it'll be very important to have that. Also, I think it would be interesting if Shea Chesky had a big game going back to her old stomping grounds.
That would be
that'd be fun.
Really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that'd be so exciting to see. But I think for Penn State, honestly, this might be their toughest matchup of the season yet for them.
I agree.
This might, whoever, Indiana can come rolling in and kind of catch them off their feet,
And I'm interested to see how they, play against Shea, because they know her and they know how she plays and they know the kind of offense that she runs and how aggressive she is on the floor. So I feel like they're definitely going to try to limit her from shooting the ball, especially because they can scout her probably better than anyone else on Indiana's team. So definitely interesting. But now, guys, our favorite part of the show. Actually, I love all of it.
Drum roll.
Drum roll. Hot topics. Ryan, why don't you lead us off with the hot topics today?
So, my first question is, what do you think IU women's basketball is going to ask for this holiday season? I feel like there's one good consensus answer that
we discussed this before the podcast started.
Yeah, what would you guys say that is?
Well, as we mentioned before, they are hoping for no injuries. This has been a tough season for Indiana. Terry Morin expressed it heavily in the press conference on Sunday about how they have not had their full team, that it's not an excuse, but this has not been their year without injury. I mean, you've had Lexus Bargesser, or someone who started in the starting five last year, out. You've had Sydney Parrish in and out with, ankle injuries and now a knee. And then you have Lene Belmont.
Yeah.
Sorry, I always stutter with her last name, but she is going to get surgery next week. So 3 players that have consistently been in and out of this lineup that I'm hoping that Terry Moore doesn't hope for anymore.
Yeah, I feel like she's really said that too about like their guards and like specifically when she was talking about the turnovers earlier in the season, she was saying it's hard to control the ball when most of your guards are injured. And, I think injuries have been a very big factor on this season, not, any excuses, but, that's also going to come into factor.
Indiana, I feel like the last couple seasons has had some bad luck when it comes to having key players injured. It was brought up in the press conference against Maine, Grace Berger 2 years ago went out for a little bit, and Chloe really had to shine and step up in that. And then last year, Sydney was out for a couple games, and then Mackenzie Holmes had the injury right at the beginning of postseason, right before postseason. So I definitely think they're wanting some health in the new year.
Yeah, I think we all hit the nail on the hammer. Did I say that wrong again?
Nail on the head.
I'm not good at this analogy. I'm just all over the place. It's almost Christmas, heads everywhere. But yes, I agree. I think that's what they're definitely wishing for. Is there any other things we think that they're wishing for?
I think we're good to move on to the next topic.
Okay.
Going conference-wide.
Yeah.
Which Big Ten teams do you think are on the good list and bad? Or talking about the good list, which teams have impressed you the most?
I'm going to go with the obvious one. I feel like I always go with the obvious, but I got to talk about it. UCLA. I mean, they're coming off a pretty big win over South Carolina, dominant, and they're just a team that I think has kind of not been talked about that much. I feel like in the Big Ten, the California West Coast teams, you talk about Juju Watkins and USC, but UCLA I think has also really been turning heads, having some big wins, and it'll be interesting to see how they do for the rest of the season.
Number 1 for the first time
Number
in program
one.
history.
Yeah, number 1.
That's impressive.
Personally, I've been following their journey this season, and I think they've played the most exciting game of basketball to follow. So,
They're
Sam,
fun.
There's nothing wrong with being basic when it's something that's important to mention.
Yeah,
Basic and obvious is always
Yeah,
important.
when a team's playing good, they're playing good. They deserve the recognition, and that's what UCLA is doing out there.
Right. Can't wait for them to come to Indiana.
Yeah,
Be
I'm
an
excited for that.
interesting matchup.
It will
But
be.
my pick is something maybe not as obvious, but you definitely could guess they're on the good list, is Maryland. I mean, what a great season they're having. I mean, they have had the best start they've had in a long time. They're ranked 7th in the nation, and they started the first time since 2018. They were ranked 18th in the preseason. They have Sailor Poffenbarger, who had back-to-back double-doubles off the bench. She's been recognized by their team as someone who's, really helped them out. So overall, I think they've had a lot of growth. I always say this, I remember when they came to Indiana, they were so scrappy and defensive, and I thought, wow, why weren't they ranked higher? But they've made some deep tournament runs, and they have the potential to be great this year. Now that, Iowa doesn't have Caitlin Clark, but there's UCLA. They're in the mix, so I'm interested to see how it goes.
Yeah.
What about you, Ryan?
I'm going to go with Michigan. Silas Swords has won Big Ten Freshman of the Week twice already in just the short month season we've had. And in the Fort Myers tip-off Shell Division Championship, Fort Myers is where Indiana went last year, if you don't remember. She was named the MVP, and she just has had big games. And then there's been other freshmen other than her that have been stepping up and been pretty great, and they're off to a 7-1 start. So it'll be impressive to see them in Big Ten play and see where they go.
I mean, they surprised me last year at the Big Ten tournament. So there was something brewing there last year when they beat Indiana in the first round of the Big Ten tournament. So I'm excited to see what all these teams bring to the table the rest of the season, because it's going to start being a brawl when Big Ten season starts here soon.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's 8 or 9 Big Ten teams in the AP Top 25. So
massive.
I mean, that's going to be a very interesting time once conference play comes around. Some good basketball is going to be played.
A lot of quality wins to add to your resume.
Oh,
Definitely.
Oh, yeah. A lot of teams just finding their way to sneak up in there.
And then talking about going to our last hot topic question, quality games being played around the country. The SEC ACC Challenge is happening this week, so I was wondering which matchups you guys are looking forward to the most.
You want to go first, Ari?
Sure. I'll do a little quick take here. It's not your most obvious matchup you're going to be looking into this upcoming week, but I'm going to say number 22 Louisville and number 11 Oklahoma. What about you, Sam?
I'm going to go with number 4 Texas and number 10 Notre Dame. Notre Dame has 2 losses on the season, and Texas hasn't, lost a game yet, but I think that'll be a fun game. It's at Notre Dame, nationally televised on ESPN. Hannah Hidalgo, she's a star player, and I think it'll be a really fun matchup to see. Yeah, what about you, Ryan?
I'm going to go with Duke and South Carolina. South Carolina rebounded really well this past week after their first loss in forever, since March of 2023 when they lost to UCLA last, or 2 weeks ago, however many days ago that was by now. So they responded well, but I'm going to see how they'll do against another top-ranked team in Duke. And Duke has a bunch of already impressive wins, beating already some couple of ranked teams. So it'll be interesting to see how both teams handle that matchup.
Yeah. Lots of good basketball in store. Lots of Indiana basketball in store. So we'll make sure to keep you covered through all of that and let you know our takes each week about the Big Ten and more on this women's basketball podcast. We've loved spending our time with you. I'm Ari Betterly, Ryan Costello, Sam Elster with the Hoosier Network, and we will catch you next time on the Fast Break Podcast.